frustrated,
tearful,
demoralized,
miserable,
scared,
frightened,
roadblocked,
alone.
Hi, my name is Jon Smart, and I'm going to talk about how behaviour, specifically leadership behaviour, is the biggest lever for better outcomes. And specifically, how leadership behaviour is the biggest lever to deliver better value sooner, safer, and happier. And when I say leaders, I mean everybody as a leader. I don't mean leaders as somebody else. Every individual is a leader, and this is you as a leader. And it's not a case of needing to have direct line reporting accountabilities. It's about everybody as a leader. And leading, it could be leading in a subject matter expertise. It could be leading people. It could be leading on a journey. And behavior, culture, behavioral norms is the biggest lever. And we're going to look at some anti-patterns and patterns around leadership behavior in order to deliver better value sooner, safer, and happier. So the world of work has changed. If you haven't noticed, if you've been living under a rock, we've had a significant fundamental change in how work gets done. We've gone from the age of oil and mass production, where work is mostly repetitive and it's knowable. These pictures are from the Detroit factory, the Ford Model T factory in Detroit, around about the 1920s. And work is repetitive. As you can see, top left, people there are making wheels day in, day out. There's role specialization, there's repetitive labor. It's the same identical task. In the Detroit factory, the very first factory at Ford, over 50 languages were spoken. And that didn't matter because people weren't speaking to each other. They didn't need to collaborate. They didn't need to speak. They just needed to do the same job day in, day out. And this is humans as cogs in the machine. And this is the origins of organized human endeavor in factories, goes back to the age of steel and heavy engineering, which was before the age of oil and mass production. And this is Taylorism and Fordism. This is time studies, telling people when to start working and stop working. Henry Gantt worked with Taylor in the early 1900s, and this is the origins of the Gantt chart. It used to be called the man days quota, of when someone could stop working and start working. Today, we're in the age of digital, and increasingly, organized human endeavor is unknowable. It's unique. In the age of digital, where every company is an information technology company, either directly or indirectly, organized human endeavor is emergent. It's increasingly unique. We haven't done this 100,000 times before. Developing software, for example, or even rolling out existing software is not a task that has been done 100,000 times before in that exact context with those exact people and that company. When writing software, you don't write the same software 100,000 times. You write it once. You realize how you could have written it better. You might refactor it, and then you deploy it, and it runs 100,000 times. So therefore, increasingly, there is a need for people to be better at emergence and at unique work. And this is how the world of work has changed. And obviously, people need to collaborate. So in the 14th State of Agile report, published May 2020, yet again, it has found that culture is the biggest challenge to better ways of working. Behavioral norms. So the number one impediment is general organizational resistance to change. The second highest impediment is insufficient leadership participation. The third highest impediment is organizational culture at odds with agile values. And the fourth highest impediment is inadequate management support and sponsorship. So very clearly, culture, behavioral norms are the single biggest challenge to adopting better ways of working which lead to better outcomes. This is a super, super important topic. In my personal experience around organizations adopting better ways of working, my rule of thumb is that this is 80% culture, 10% process, and 10% tooling. However, unfortunately, there are a lot of organizations that approach this the other way round, where it's either tooling-led or process-led. And as I said, 4 of the top 5 relate to behavior. So we're going to look at some anti-patterns and patterns around behavior and leadership behavior. I like the language of anti-pattern and pattern because there's no such thing as best practice. Change is emergent. Human systems are complex adaptive systems, and there's emergence that's unknowable. So patterns and anti-patterns are approaches that generally work. More times than not, they help you to achieve your better outcomes. Anti-patterns are things that will generally hinder achieving better outcomes. And again, there's no such thing as best practice. So you have to apply these patterns and anti-patterns in your context. So the first anti-pattern we're going to look at is do as I say, not as I do. So this is failing to role model the desired change. The second anti-pattern we're going to look at is psychologically unsafe, a lack of psychological safety, as we saw at the beginning, examples there with Deepwater Horizon and the space shuttle, the 2 space shuttle tragedies. And then the third anti-pattern we're going to look at is a deterministic mindset. The corresponding patterns are leaders going first, role modeling the desired behavior, exhibiting vulnerability and courage. The second pattern we're going to look at is psychological safety. And the third pattern we'll look at is an emergent mindset. First of all, let's look at what and who is a leader. I looked at the definition, the origins of the word lead, and I found this quite fascinating. There's absolutely nothing in the origins of the word lead to do with order, command, commit, mandate. Instead, the origins of the word lead come from Old English and Proto-Germanic language, meaning to guide, to accompany, and to travel. So lead means, in effect, to guide on a journey. And what I like about this is it's not a case of off you go on your journey, I'm going to wait here, tell me when you get there. It's going on the journey and guiding on the journey with the people going on the journey. So I really like this definition of lead, the origins of the word lead, which is guiding on a journey. So let's look at the difference between a commander and a leader. So origins of the word command come from 2 words in Latin, which is commit and mandate. So a commander is literally mandating a commitment, as opposed to a leader who is guiding on a journey. 2 very, very different words and 2 very different behaviors. So let's look at these behaviors and these roles. So a commander, it's a position. It's for a few. It's for those in authority. A commander orders. The commander-in-chief issues orders. Obeying is mandatory because it's positional. There's extrinsic motivation, which means you don't have a choice. The commander is issuing an order, which you have to obey. And as I said, power is positional. So a commander is in a position of command, authority, and issues mandates. Conversely, a leader is a behavior and a mindset rather than a position. And as I said at the beginning, everybody can be a leader. Everybody can lead in any particular area through their behavior. It's for everybody. There are leaders at all levels. A leader listens, inspires, and informs. So a leader, as much as anything, can be listening, reflecting, and actually asking the right questions. The inspire and inform, inspiring is around helping to articulate the purpose and the mission for the journey. And informing is making sure that there's transparency and communication. Following is voluntary. People don't have to follow a leader. There's intrinsic motivation. People are choosing to follow a leader, choosing to go on the journey through their own volition. And power is given by followers. Power is not innate. It is not a position. It is given voluntarily by followers. So these are two very, very different sets of behaviors and very different ways of behaving. Unfortunately, a lot of organizations have a lot of behaviors on the left-hand side, and increasingly there are behaviors on the right-hand side. It's not binary. It's not all or nothing. There are times when individuals need to flex between being a leader and being a commander. So there might be a crisis, such as the pandemic, for example, where it might be beneficial to take more of a commander style in terms of making decisions quickly and getting stuff done and getting out of danger and getting out of chaos. And then it might be that then the majority of the time it's about being more of a leader. And importantly, the goal is not agile, lean, or DevOps for the sake of agile, lean, and DevOps. The goal is delivering better value sooner, safer, happier, better outcomes. So whether a commander or a leader, the goal around leading is to deliver better outcomes, better value sooner, safer, happier. So let's take a closer look at what that means. First of all, better. Better is quality. So this could be in the context of information technology. This could be incidents. It could be time to recovery. In the context of operational processing, it could be straight through processing breaks. It could be reconciliation breaks. In the case of physical manufacturing, it could be defective products which have been made. It could be returns. It could be customer call center complaints and so on. Value is at the heart. Value is measured through OKRs, objectives and key results, and it's the reason you're in business. Value is unique. It could be, in the case of financial services, it could be mortgages, it could be credit card, it could be investment banking. It could be, in the case of retail, it could be handbags, trench coats, fashion. It could be anything. It's the reason you're in business. Sooner is flow. It's lead time, time to learning, time to de-risk, time to monetize. It's throughput, the number of items of value in a given period of time, and it's flow efficiency, which is one of the most important measures, in my opinion, and it's also probably one of the least measured measures. Flow efficiency is the amount of time that work is being worked on versus work is waiting. Most large organizations have a flow efficiency of 10% or less, which means that work is waiting 90% of the time or more, and that is not great. That's not good, and this is in particular a key metric to focus on in terms of time to value, time to learning, enabling agility. Safer is continuous compliance. It's agile, not fragile. It's things such as GDPR, data privacy, regulation, information security, cyber, compliance, fraud, anti-money laundering, and so on. These are both the external mandatory risk stories that need to be implemented through regulation, but it's also your internal mandatory policies and standards. And then there's happier, which is happier colleagues, customers, citizens, and climate, because it's not at any cost to the planet or to society in terms of improving ways of working. And the great thing about these across every organization that I've either worked for or worked with is these apply in every context, in my experience, and they balance each other out. So as we've seen in the State of DevOps report, if an organization tries to force sooner by working people harder rather than improving the system of work, you see the quality go down and you see happiness goes down. So the great thing about this is it's very hard to game this, and it's very hard to kind of force one of the metrics because they balance each other out. And the trick here is to look at the vector metric, the improvement over time, the trend over time, and you're looking for a positive trend in these measures. And these are more than measures, they're a philosophy, because again, these are the outcomes you're trying to achieve. So now we're going to take a look at the 3 anti-patterns.
Early on in my career, I was a project manager, and the boss I had at the time was someone who did not take bad news well. He was very much shoot the messenger. And as time went on, I found myself burying bad news, whether it was about timescale or cost overruns, time and time again, to the extent it got so bad that there was one piece of information I couldn't share with him prior to the project review board. I felt I had to shield myself from his anger by telling him the news in the public forum.
It's a culture that's not just sort of disempowering, but also massively negatively impactful to the work you do as well. So you end up in a position where you as an individual aren't comfortable, the team are unhappy, and ultimately in a client environment, the client can sense that the customer cannot be satisfied if the colleagues aren't satisfied. Where do you end up with? You end up with a negative spiral, and the team disbanded. The entire piece of work collapsed, not through the individual lack of capability of any of the team members, but rather because the team itself imploded.
So the first anti-pattern is do as I say, not as I do. This is failing to role model the desired behavior. This is figuratively sitting around a table with arms crossed, saying, go on, transform, I dare you. Leaders need to exhibit vulnerability and courage and need to role model the behavior that is being expected of teams. And this is very important. It's very clear to see when someone is not authentic and is not walking the talk. It's very, very clear to see. And if people are seeing people in more senior positions not role modeling it, not role modeling the desired behavior, then it's going to not necessarily lead to the best possible outcomes. So there is a need to, for example, practice what's being preached, have stand-ups, visualize work in progress, have an enterprise visibility room, even if it's a virtual one with the current pandemic, to limit work in progress, talk to tickets, have a stand-up, as I said, kind of practice some of these things that might feel uncomfortable at the same time as being asked of teams. And to quote Frederick Laloux, the author of Reinventing Organizations, the level of consciousness of an organization cannot exceed the level of consciousness of its leader. So in a given traditional kind of hierarchy and org chart, you'll have a bubble of better ways of working around the most senior leader who is supporting and advocating and sponsoring better ways of working. So ideally, you want that to be the most senior leadership team possible in order to be able to for that bubble to be as big as possible to get the best benefits. If it's not the most senior leader and the most senior leadership team are not behind this and not prioritizing it, there will be limited progress. It will be very hard to get stuff done, in particular when working across the organization with PMO, portfolio management, with finance, with funding, with the budget process, with HR, and so on and so on and so on. The second anti-pattern is psychologically unsafe. So we saw at the beginning the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, which is the worst oil spill in history, the worst accidental environmental disaster in history. Over half of the workers surveyed said they had a fear of reprisal for reporting unsafe conditions. And we saw the space shuttle example as well, where 17 years apart, the finding was that the same cultural traits existed around a lack of psychological safety. In the case of the 2013 disaster, an engineer tried 6 times to escalate the fact that this large chunk of foam had come off of the wing and had hit another part of the space shuttle. 6 times he tried, he was rebuked, and he was told, this issue is a dead issue, stop escalating. So he stopped escalating, unfortunately with tragic consequences. Psychological safety is absolutely paramount for modern ways of working. Another example is Boeing. So the US House Committee on Transportation, in their 737 MAX preliminary report in March 2020, reported that 39% of employees surveyed perceived undue pressure. 29% were concerned about the consequences of reporting that undue pressure. And the report said there was a culture of concealment and a disturbing picture of cultural issues. And this was effectively, I think, the culmination of a long-running change in the culture at Boeing, from originally being engineering-led to eventually a focus where cost and schedule overtook safety, which is what's been reported in that US House Committee report. Unfortunately, again, with tragic consequences. Anti-pattern number 3 is a deterministic mindset. So this is leaders continuing with a belief that work is predictable and knowable when it isn't. When it's a complex adaptive system, when the change is unique, when it's not been done before. This is having a Gantt chart with milestones, a focus on the output rather than the outcome, a focus on the solution. And there are many organizations where the definition of success is measured by, did you hit the milestone? And it's not really focused on the outcomes. It's not really focused on, is this maximizing value to the organization? Is this maximizing time to value? Nope, it's, have you achieved the plan and have you achieved the milestone? And you often see this as well with the, in a kind of self-referential way, with the imposition of Agile. Nobody expects the Agile imposition. To misquote Monty Python, our 2 weapons are fear and surprise and ruthless efficiency. And it's not unusual, unfortunately, to see a deterministic mindset applied to the forced infliction of Agile ways of working, which is meant to be all about emergence and learning and outcomes and people over process. So this is most definitely an anti-pattern and a learning. So now we're going to look at the 3 patterns.
Okay, so working on a piece of work that we decided to work on it together, which meant that we had to find that time together. And we sat down and brainstormed it. And there was a real feeling of understanding that I knew the detail, but being able to position it together meant that we delivered a higher quality piece of work in what turned out to be, between us, a shorter period of time, which was a much more valuable experience for me, for my leader, and for the organization I was working for.
I remember being on a team as a leader where I was pretty demoralized for a while, and a new leader stepped in during this time. And before that, every time I had mentioned that I was not happy, there was a lot of talk that, you know, if you need to go, we hate to lose you, but we understand. This new leader stepped in, and without having all the background and the context, all he noticed was that I was a good worker and I was an effective leader. And when he finally found out that I was somebody who was looking to possibly leave the group, he went out of his way to create a position where I could actually have an impact where I was, because he really proved to me that he did not want to lose me as a team member. And he really made me feel as if I was an impact on the organization. I really appreciated that.
So in more recent work, I've benefited from having an empowering, visionary leader who seeks to allow colleagues and teams to thrive, who actively seeks to serve the needs of team members, is adaptive, and is someone who actively shows an interest in both the individual, their happiness, their well-being, almost their employee net promoter score, and in response gains a willing, enthused, capable, connected, empowered colleague.
As I've progressed through my career, I've got a better idea of what good leadership looks like, I think. And one of my more recent bosses was incredibly supportive. He made me feel that I could discuss absolutely anything with him. And I think one of the ways he did this was every single one-to-one, he started with, how can I help you? And he just said that, how can I help you? Once we got some lovely pleasantries out of the way, he said, how can I help you? And that powerful statement made me realise that actually between he and I, we could solve whatever pressing points were there. and that he was there to really bounce ideas off and support me and really help me move forward. I respected him, so I did come to him with problems, and he did give me different perspectives. But at the end of the day, he indicated by his behaviours and his words that the decision was mine. And really, I grew under his leadership so much more than I have under many of my other bosses. It really was. It made me feel great, supported, and I've taken a lot of his practices into my leadership practice as well.
Pattern number 1 is leaders go first. There's a need to role model the desired behavior. There's a need to exhibit vulnerability and courage. And again, as I said, this could be around visualizing work in the system, visualizing work in progress at a portfolio level. This could be having a regular stand-up with your team. This is about inspecting and adapting, having the feedback loop, not having a 60-page PowerPoint deck in a steering committee, not having 26 governance committees, optimizing for flow, visualizing work in the system, focusing on impediments, and communicate, recognizing and rewarding the great things that people are doing. Social proof is incredibly important, and role modeling is also incredibly important in order to optimize for outcomes. Pattern number 2 is psychological safety. Project Aristotle at Google, well publicized. Psychological safety was found to be the number 1 determinant for high performing teams. And this is people being able to say, I don't know, I'm not sure. Yes, I'll jump in terms of multidisciplinary teams, jumping in to do someone else's area of specialism. T-shaped people, comb-shaped people with a deep specialism and willing to jump in and do other people's roles and other people's areas of responsibility and specialism. So Amy Edmondson is a well-known writer and expert on this topic around psychological safety. Amy Edmondson has written a book called Fearless Organizations, which is well worth reading. And Amy talks about 3 steps to building psychological safety. The first step is to invite participation. So where there's been a culture of fear, people will not want to come forward. So you need to set the stage. You need to set the stage and say, we have blame-free culture. It's not about blaming individuals. We want to learn. So there's a need to very explicitly kind of set the stage. Inviting participation is encouraging people to speak up, to share their learnings, to not bury bad news. Typically, there's a bad news filter in most organizations where bad news fails to go maybe 1 level up and most definitely 2 levels up in a reporting hierarchy. So you're inviting participation, and then thirdly, you're thanking people and celebrating the fact that people are offering their learnings and offering their learning through failing. So you're kind of celebrating the fact that people are exhibiting psychological safety. So it needs a very conscious approach if the current environment is a culture of fear. And intelligent failure should be celebrated. So the image here is the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket being deliberately destroyed with intelligent failure. And this was to test the launch escape capsule of the Crew Dragon capsule. And SpaceX it deliberately destroyed the rocket. This was intelligent failure. This is exactly what we need more of. We need more with a limited impact radius. We need intelligent failure so that people can learn from it. Pattern 3 is an emergent mindset. And this is recognizing that work is emergent. And this is recognizing that a belief in the past that we can have Gantt charts with milestones where we predictively plan everything that's going to happen in the future is failing to optimize for the best possible outcomes. It's limiting optionality, it's limiting learning. A traditional approach is delaying learning to the last possible minute. It's, in my opinion, incredibly risky because you're delaying the learning to the last minute when you've got the least time to respond to it. Instead, this is a focus on outcomes rather than output. So, for example, OKRs, objectives and key results. This is articulating outcomes as a hypothesis. And we need to test those hypotheses The key results, the KR in OKR, are leading and lagging value measures. So on a regular cadence, you're looking at your leading and lagging value measures. If they're moving in the right direction, all is good. You amplify those experiments, what it is you're doing. If they're not going in the right direction, then maybe you need to dampen that experiment and you need to pivot and try something else. And that gives you the genuine agility. That fast feedback loop on your outcome hypothesis gives you business agility. Emily Campbell posted this tweet, which I really like, which is, what if we called them supporting lines instead of reporting lines? Imagine replacing lines like, these are my direct reports with, these are the people I directly support. I love the sentiment in this around servant leadership. And there's a role for leaders here, leaders at all levels, which is nicely articulated in the coaching charter. So this is Mike Rother, the Toyota improvement charter and the Toyota coaching charter. There's a role for leaders to play here around coaching teams and supporting teams, helping teams with their kind of problem solving and experimentation thought processes around how impediments are being tackled. Not having all the answers. There should be zero expectation to have all of the answers. Rather, it's coaching and guiding teams to use their own brains to help remove impediments to the outcomes. So to recap, if you want better value sooner, safer, happier, first of all, go first, leaders lead, guide on a journey. Secondly, foster psychological safety. There's a need for experimentation, there's a need to fail, there's a need to learn, intelligent failure. There has to be psychological safety. And the more psychological safety there is, the more people will experiment and the better the outcomes will be. This does need to be within minimal viable guardrails to ensure that that there are some things that are not negotiable to remain in control, and that's the safe word. Back to better value sooner, safer, happier. And the better the brakes, the faster you can go. And then finally, leverage emergence, maintain optionality, maintain variability, run experiments in order to try to achieve the most value in the shortest time with the least effort.
Inspired.
Reassured.
Empowering.
Trusted.
Confident.
Rewarded.
Nurturing.
Excited.
In my opinion, leadership is how you leave people feeling. I think this is a good rule of thumb around being a leader, is how do you leave people feeling? Do you leave people feeling with having pride, feeling proud, feeling like they have purpose, mission, achieving good work? Or do people feel that there's a culture of fear, feeling fearful? Leadership is how you leave people feeling. So I've shared a number of anti-patterns and patterns here. I've shared 3 anti-patterns and 3 patterns. This book, Sooner, Safer, Happier, is out on the 10th of November. And this is a collection of anti-patterns and patterns for business agility. There's a chapter in the book on leadership. And altogether, there are 52 anti-patterns and patterns in here. There's a number of principles. There's a mind map to help you on your journey. So there's a whole depth and treasure trove here of other lessons learned, which I hope can help you on your journeys. Thank you.